$100 million and tackle all of the schools in the district. The commitment to the public was that every school would be brought to current standards, whether it was new construction or renovation, and that would be done. Originally, the time frame was to be 5 years. It ultimately got stretched out to about 6.5 years before all was said and done. But over a 5-year period, we would do that. The time schedules that we had looked at before were looking at stuff that was going to be done in 17 years or 23 years or 25 years, or one of the studies indicated we would never be able to catch up. So it was an odd to infinity. And the problem with that is, if you start out with the assumption that it's 10 or 12 years before you can touch a school, that means that a generation of school children will go to schools that are not up to standards. And the longer you go, the more children in that cohort will not get into a new school, or an updated school. So what happened in the community, one of the things that happened was the community, sector by sector, they had single-member districts for the election of the school board. The community, sector by sector, fell to fighting one another over who was going to get the money next, whose school was going to be done next. And it was kind of fun to watch sometimes, but it wasn't really very fun to live with if you were trying to get schools done. So by coming up with a plan that let us tell people we would be done in 5 years, we were able to get rid of all the internecine fighting among the various different contingents in the school district. Now, we still had people who didn't want to do it because they thought it was weird and odd, everything was going to go wrong, and the world was going to come to an end, and we were going to have a new presidential election, and just all kinds of bad things were going to happen. So, but that's what this group is about, to get people comfortable with the fact that you can do what you set about to do. The aha moment was realizing if we could take the stream of revenues that we had and convert it into immediate funding up front for the construction, we'd be able to get all the construction done. We had to devise a plan, a financing plan that allowed us to do that. And the financing plan is rather complicated. Whenever I see a slide or a PowerPoint presentation and it has that many boxes on it and arrows, I get really kind of worried. But we used a 6320 corporation, and 6320 is a term of art in my business because the tax code allows these entities to issue tax-exempt debt even though they're not governments. So we didn't have to fight the battle of whether the debt was taxable or tax-exempt. We had tax-exempt debt. They entered into a contract with the school district under the terms of which they would arrange for the building of all the buildings. They would issue the bonds and build all the buildings. The contract allowed the school district to control exactly what the buildings were going to be and how they were going to be done and a whole bunch of other stuff, so it wasn't really the nonprofit that was doing it in that sense. But the nonprofit was committed to issue the bonds and finance the construction, in return for which the school district was going to agree to pay installment payments for the purchase of the facilities as they were built and completed or renovated, as the case may be. So we had this large installment purchase financing. The school district agreed to pay the revenues that it had over a 30-year period in return for getting all the schools built up front in the 5 to 6 year period that would ultimately resolve. We issued the bonds. The school district has to fund its payments through the issuance of annual GO bonds that are very short term, so it's not a carryover from one fiscal year to the next, and that's important to some people. But in any event, the school district used its revenues to make the installment payments. The nonprofit corporation issued the bonds, sold the bonds, provided the funding, they started the construction, they did all the work. During the course of doing the work, the reason we kept falling behind was costs were going up more rapidly than the value of our revenue stream was going up. So in the space of a relatively short period of time, the cost to get something done, and this graph shows, I think they're having increases in construction prices, an aggregate picture. This is a better illustration of what the problem was. What we did in the period until 2007 cost about $1.88 million. If we had tried to do it on a pay-as-you-go basis over a longer term, it was going to take $3.21 billion if inflation was at 5%, and $4.982 billion, roughly $5 billion, if it was 6% inflation rate. The problem was our revenue stream was not growing. We committed a fixed revenue stream, and there was nothing we could do to fight inflation. So we also had growth in the school district that needed to be dealt with, but that was the problem. We couldn't get ahead. So the way the thing got put together was, and this is what I think this group is about. It's going to take a lot of work to get the community behind a project of such a large scale, and with those big numbers on somehow borrowing debt somewhere sitting out there that's going to have to be paid back. So in Greenville, we had an organized effort with the community to explain to them what we were doing and why we were doing it and what was going to be the benefit to them. That effort took place over about a year, maybe a year and a half's worth of time.